This is the official 1-minute warning. We're going to get this show on the road in a minute. You've had an extra hour, right? Come on down. Seems like a very humane thing to do. Sure, we had church last week. Good morning. Glad to have you here this morning. Are we rolling onto the interwebs there, Robin? Good. Welcome to everybody in the room, everybody at home watching on live stream, all of you watching off into the future sometime, looking back at this remarkable event we're about to have. Welcome. We're glad that you're all here. Tell you what we're going to do this morning. We've been going through we're in our fourth week here. I'll put the whole schedule up here because all of these are available to you online if you're going to go find one that you missed on our YouTube page. The first session, we gave an overview to kind of place the different work in its relationship with the rest of the projects. On the 23rd, we had outreach and kitchen that Margaret helped to walk us through. Last week, Charles shipped church, organ, and accessible entries. So we talked about some of our traditional spaces, and that's actually how we get around. And then this week, we've got green spaces, parking, and sustainability, and Matt Seltzer and I are going to tag team this one today. And then next week will be the last one. David Lusk and I are going to talk about formation, music, nursery, and offices. The other stuff, but that stuff does actually fit together, and as you know, how we move back and forth between those kind of spaces is something that we're really hoping to improve. I'm going to call up the Venerable Mimsy Jones, and she's our representative from our Spiritual Emphasis Committee, and she's going to lead us, ground us in what we're doing today.
The Lord be with you. Let us pray, and I invite you to read the prayer with me. Holy God, you call us to make your love visible in the world around us. Give us wisdom and courage to meet this moment with generosity and with hope, that we may grow in your loving kindness and show forth your compassion in our community with renewed faithfulness and boldness. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. You call us to make your love visible in the world. Visible. Visible, of course, means able to be seen. The last few weeks, we have learned about the proposed changes, mostly for the inside. They're beautiful, practical, thoughtful, and I believe absolutely essential. The changes that on every level of this building that we call our church home. So I'm not going to talk about the inside today, but looking outward, because as many of you know, I worked with outreach for as long as I can remember here, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. In confirmation, does anyone want to tell me what the definition of a sacrament is that you learned in confirmation? Yeah.
An open and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace.
Yeah. An outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. Today, we're going to look outward. for visible signs of God's love in the world that emanate right here from Calvary. And the point of this, since I've never had a facelift, I can say, of this facelift, is not to show off, but it's to welcome people in. It is not to be the flashiest building in downtown Memphis, to be the most welcoming, the most inviting place that people are eager to learn more about and get inside. So, many of you will remember this person, but let's flash back to the 1970s, early in the 1970s. It's a Sunday morning, and as I did, you bring your 2 young children and park in the side lot where Calvary Place came to be later on. And you round the corner onto 2nd Street, and you see a man sitting on the sidewalk. My memory of him is that he had only one leg. He was sitting there on a blanket folded up under him with a handful, maybe a couple of dozen pencils on one side of him. And on the other side, there was an old felt hat where we were asked to drop, or we just dropped our coins. Does anybody remember that man? Madge does. I apologize for my voice. You know, I've had a little unpleasantness, illness. And I think the pencils cost a nickel. So the children, we would almost remember. Did you remember that at all? You were only tiny. To bring some quarters to put in for a pencil. And about that time, a new rector was called here. Doug Bailey was his name. And since I was very involved with what I remember is that his question was, what is this man doing sitting outside of this building selling pen? Why isn't he inside with us? And that was just the beginning of what followed. A vision of what an old downtown church could really be like as an outward and visible symbol of an inward and spiritual grace. And this rector was wise enough to recruit a woman named Pat Morgan, who's sitting right here today, to recruit and to explain a ministry that was to begin downstairs in the undercroft or the basement. Her question to all of us volunteers was, her order was, ask people what is the root cause of their issue, of their homelessness. We had some vouchers for bus tickets and overnight, but Pat's point was, ask people why they are homeless. And one-on-one, we didn't have any beds, we didn't give out any food, it was a rare thing, I think, for these people to be looked at one-on-one with trained volunteers, and that was the beginning of what was known as the street ministry, an outward and visible, very visible sign. And may I please forgive my French, but oh my God, Christine Todd, she is a force to be reckoned with, and she has followed not in Pat's footsteps so much, but as directing all the outreach ministries here. And again, outward and visible signs. Look on Sunday morning. Look at her community involvement. Look at her relentless advocacy for people who have needs on every level. All of this is being done, and of course, I'm not even mentioning the abundance of loving, effective, brilliant, beautiful worship that is conducted, the classes that go on. Again, today we're not talking about inside, we're talking about outside. I don't see Charles Shipp here, but I'm going to drop the name of a famous architect named Frank Lloyd Wright. I don't know if you all have heard of him, but when I was in college, I took an art history class, and the teacher, we had architecture as part of that, and she kept saying, Frank Lloyd Wright's motto is form follows function. So what the function of the building is, it should look like on the outside. Thus, instead of a man selling pencils on the outside, the man is inside dealing with why he is sitting out there. And as I've looked, well, it's not up yet, but what you'll see in a minute is this new exterior of the building, which when I saw this, you all, I literally, it was like catching fire. I love this new project, this new ministry building that is being proposed. And when I look at it today, if you come in on a beautiful day like this, after a good night's sleep, and look at the buildings together, and this is no offense because such wonderful things happen inside, but it's kind of this scrunched up look with everything kind of piled on and no visibility really. When you look at the new plans, it's like everything is wide open. There's light, there's vibrancy, I've got chills just even talking about it. So I've decided that these architects who designed this new plan for our Calvary must have studied Frank Lloyd Wright very well. They have opened visibly the ministry possibilities here to people who are hungry for God's love, Calvary style. And we have a unique and I believe extraordinarily rare opportunity to open up wider and be effective for others. Think of some green space. The plaza, which you will see in a minute, is when my heart just sang. The idea of some open space, like in New York, there are all these little pocket parks where you can go in and just rest your feet and take a deep breath. We will have that here. There's nothing like that except maybe Court Square. And when you sit in the plaza or walk through it and look up at the incredibly beautiful entrance to the building, and it's open. It's inviting. It's lit light. I mean, even in rain, it would be be a very inviting place to be. So the whole Calvary block, green with trees, actually a green space to come in and breathe deeply. And I have written, if you have a carefully trained ecological eye, you will notice that new quality controls have been honored throughout, as Matt Seltzer will tell us about in a minute. We're honoring God's admonition to take care of the earth just as we are taking care of each other and those outside of ourselves. The scriptural theme for this amazing ministry project is from the prophet Isaiah, and it goes like this. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. Lift up your eyes and look around. The people all gather together. They come to you. Your sons shall come from far away, and your daughters shall be carried on their nurses' arms. Then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and rejoice. My heart is thrilled and rejoicing, and I hope yours is too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimsy. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to tell you at the outset, the things we're going to talk about today will be more like guiding principles than they've been in the past. If you think about this project, then you'll understand, I think, why. If you think about this project, if we start as soon as we can after Easter next year, our outside closest in spaces are going to be actually staging areas for construction until we get to the end. So a lot of what we've kicked into place are the processes that will lead to the spaces we need and the kind of conversations that are going on. Some of them are remarkable. And then Matt's going to follow me and talk about how we're addressing our ecological responsibility. What I want to start with, I don't know if this is a point of privilege, but I think it's a great day for this, is as I want to talk about Tommy Pacello, if I can. Tommy, his birth, he would have been 45 last Monday. And we buried Tommy from Calvary almost 2 years ago. If you don't know him, he was absolutely a vibrant, vital force for Memphis. He changed this city with the vision he had for different places here. And he was the head of the Memphis Medical District Collaborative, and pockets of life around this town exist that wouldn't exist without Tommy. And we're glad that Olivia and Colette and Cecile are still running around here reminding us of him. But I mention him because the picture below, that's the corner of Marshall and Monroe in the Edge District, close to Sun Studios. That's part of the kind of things that where Tommy would start. He did some high-end, beautiful, elegant design, and also something called tactical urbanism, which is just getting practical about, I wonder what we could do with a few chairs and some paint to occupy a place for a while and see how people want to be there. How might it come alive? How might a corner that just is really an intersection become a place for people again? And part of the question, and this will get to here are some places that Tommy put his thumbprint on. The one on the bottom is there in the Edge Alley. The one up top is this temporary installation they did over across the street from across A.W. Willis in an empty lot with just construction lumber for a period of time. So then I wonder if we could bring this place to life with this forest. And right there was my office for quite a bit of COVID, because Tommy looked right out there and he said, you could get a couple of cheap chairs at IKEA and set it out here and you've got a place. All about placemaking, tactical. And one of the questions that he raised when they were looking at the medical district is he said, this place, there's not as much crime here as people think that there is. The built environment conveys that there is. Let me ask you a question. If you walk go right down a neighborhood and there's bars on the window, do you feel safer? We don't, right? They announce something. We're on guard. And Tommy believed that the way we address our spaces not only need to be safe and responsible, but they're going to communicate something. They're going to communicate to the folks who walk in, and we'll have a certain experience based on what we see and experience. I want to show you one more example. It doesn't have to be inside. Does anybody walk into Calvary this time of year? It just went up. Our beautiful AIDS sculpture just went up this week. Do you walk into that room unchanged? Right? It changes something about you, even though we love this room for the 11 months of the year when that's not present. It takes my breath away every time I walk in each year. The space, my experience is reframed. All of this is just another way of getting at what Tommy lived into so beautifully and saying, if we attend to our spaces in certain ways, it affects the way people encounter one another. It affects how we feel. It affects our feeling of safety. And to get to what Mimsy was mentioning, how we're moving towards some openness, we're also attentive to safety. Because open and visibility ends up, if we do it right, is the best way to be safe in a city, is to be able to have lots of people in a room to see folks. I want to mention this too. So we're really talking about Calvary's block and how we interface with our neighborhood today, right? And what are the principles that drive it? So we got practical people like Tommy who've showed us how to experiment and say these are the kind of questions we ought to be asking about how our places aren't just parking lots for cars. They accommodate cars, but they're made for people too. These are 6 markers of a city, and I think they're relevant to mention as we move into this. This comes from a book by Eric O. Jacobson, who's a Presbyterian pastor in Tacoma, but a leading thinker on urbanism and the church. And the book is Sidewalks in the Kingdom, New Urbanism in the Christian Faith. And we studied it a few years ago in a class here. A few of you have read it. Here are the 6 markers. See if they make sense to you. Public spaces. Spaces who aren't for just some people, but for everybody. Mixed-use neighborhood. Different things happen in a neighborhood, right? It's not big box stores all here in a row. We've got a business, and we've got a restaurant, and we've got a law firm, we've got a church, and we've got a courthouse, right? All of these mixes. We've got a park. Non-essential beauty. Walk around a city. right? Any great city in the world that stayed alive, there's beauty just for the sake of beauty. Look at some of the old buildings when you walk down the street. Why did they take the time to add that corbelling up on that stone, right? And it's available to everybody who walks down the sidewalk. A local economy. The businesses around here are more likely to be owned and run by people from Memphis, aren't they? If you walk down the street in downtown, it's just part of being in an urban environment. The presence of strangers. If everybody you see, you know, you're not in a city, right? The richness of the city is that we create spaces that, again, with visibility, and we're able to encounter people who aren't like us. I loved hearing from some of our seniors of just a couple of years, I think it was maybe just as COVID was ending, talking about one of their experiences of Calvary. Says, I'm comfortable with people I wouldn't be comfortable with if I didn't go to church downtown. And honestly, they're safer, right? Because a person who has experiences has a fuller understanding of where to draw a line and what might be dangerous and what might be safe. It's rich to hear how the presence of strangers form us. The sixth is a critical mass. Critical mass. You got to have so many people in a small enough space for it to feel like a city, right? It's one reason why a big question that Memphis has right now is what to do with parking lots. How to accommodate cars without having vast expanses of empty parking lots, which is a critical mass of nothing but iron. So the city is really looking at that and how different clusters of parking and how to connect those can help free up space so that we can get to where we need to go and not have these vast empty spaces. So these are the three areas I want to talk about before Matt comes up. And the section in your case study, when you get it, it's lovely that when Mimsy read from Isaiah, they've divided up the different aspects according to that passage. And the ones they chose for this is, nations shall come to your light. You know, that great image in Isaiah, but also carries on through the New Testament, that this light to the nations, the city that had, Israel was meant to be a light to other people, not just to be this special chosen folks who huddle up all on their own to be God's people. So that's what's going to gather this plaza and pedestrian space. We'll talk a little bit about parking flow and drop-off, practical stuff, and then we're going to talk about the civic memorial space for where the marker, the work we did around the marker and the slave site that was active on Calvary's block in the middle of the 19th century. What do I have here? I'm going to start with the plaza. This is what Mimsy referred to. This isn't an unfair picture, I think. I don't think this is an unfair picture. I think the second picture truly is a replacement of the former. This is where most people, especially if you have mobility needs, that's where you come into Calvary right now. If you can't climb those front steps and the front doors open, that's where you come into Calvary. Someone's parked the wrong way in an alley outside our front door. These are signals, right, that the environment here, what it's suggesting to other folks. Now, what I love about this is that for decades, Calvary's pushed past it, right? Like, it is a vibrant, alive, living space. Think about Waffle Shop pouring in there, and we put banners out, and we do all the things. And we take somebody by the hand, and we lead them up through this maze to get them to church, right? So it's really beautiful. The things we're talking about is not changing that. It's changing our space to as Mimsy put beautifully, to better look like the people we are and the people we want to be, and to shape us in that way. So all of these are conceptual at this point. We are in talks with folks about how to actually, some civil engineers, about what's the right relationship with parking and green space. How will the flow go? We have a school over here. I'm meeting with Tim Ware this week to talk about the school. What would it be a better drop-off situation? If you've been here during the end of school, it's quite a lot to have cars backed up and going through the alley here. But the key is that we have this entry that's very visible. The only added space that we're going to add, hopefully, to Calvary is just this few feet right here. Now, it seems like it might be, why do we need to do that? Valid question. The reason we would put it there is because you need to know the front door. The front door of the church, we got a bell tower, right, to announce to the world, this is how you come in the church. This was our front door, especially since the way it's arranged, we have a fairly narrow plaza area. You need to be able to see and be drawn toward that entrance. And that ties us to our exterior. I got to keep talking. So the plaza space, I think we've talked about. We're looking at pedestrian space in here and green space. As of now, we now own our alley. This is good news. We worked hard. We went to the city and appealed. What that allows us to do, yeah, sure, applaud that. What that allows it, this is the end of Maggie Isabel, right? This is the last block. And so they were amenable to us saying, we could use our space much more efficiently and hopefully return some green to the city if you'd give us the alley. It's quite a bit of square footage. So the alley will be our space. The other, I'll talk about in just a second, the civic and memorial space, what we've learned is right up against the church because that's where the market actually existed. I'll talk about that in a minute. So we're talking about transforming this staff parking lot into that green space. To balance the safety, there's conversations too about it may be that this area right here, maybe it makes sense to have some, not a fortress, but a fence, so that maybe children could play out there in events and stuff, but the gates would still fly open and welcome people. Everything would encourage welcome, but those are the kind of things in balance, where do you want to have a little bit of control about when and what you might put out there, and yet how does it convey invitation and openness and welcome. The other piece I'll mention here that's allowed parking flow, next is parking flow and drop-off. We'll talk about that in conjunction. So if you see the gray here, these are rough spaces that we're talking about allotting for parking and drop-off. I don't have all of the spaces counted out for you because the civil engineers aren't there, and we're still working on the footprint of this piece. But we want a good drop-off for Grizzlies prep, however that might happen. We want more green. We want enough parking for us, given the city we live in and the way we get around. But one thing I want to point out is all the gray is parking. And our understanding is that on 2nd Street will soon be, every day of the week, public parking along the street in front of the church. That's part of the plan that the city is working on, which will really help us a lot. It might even keep a couple of cars from running into our fence, as they seem to do once a year on that northwest corner of our block. So when we start to think about parking in terms of how do we accommodate folks who have the needs to get in here safely, which of course our current lot is that bumpy pothole place, and then how can the rest of us, it may well be that street parking right here is actually a whole lot closer to church than over here. So we'll address that. And then we're going to take into consideration all of the things that are happening around us with regard to parking. I'm also meeting next week with Brett Roller at the Downtown Memphis Commission, because as we know, 100 North Main has not only been purchased to be renovated, but it was purchased by the Downtown Mobility Authority. So it has to be an integral part of Memphis's overall parking strategy, which again, so that right across the street, we will have an element of that. People need to be able to have a garage where you can park safely and inexpensively, and I'm going to be lobbying for, surely they don't use it much on Sunday mornings, right? Don't you think? Come on. Those are the areas. So those are the aspects. I want to talk about quickly here now, this civic memorial space. As I mentioned, we did this really important work with Tim's leadership, and Margaret was involved, and Tim's students at Rhodes. For those who maybe someone in this room doesn't know about it, we have a video about that whole process as to we began to come to terms with what it meant to be a people who had folks being bought and sold on their block while our forebears were going to church. And I think we did that work faithfully in a way that didn't dismiss them as awful, like we're beyond this, but as actually we want to just tell the truth so that we can see our own lives and what we might be living in complicity with as well. We want that to continue, and we want to have some space to offer back to the city to honor that memorial. And what we've done is we've pulled together a group of folks to be a steering committee. Margaret Haltom, it's great to have a child of Calvary. I don't think she would mind us saying that. Margaret Haltom is working on her PhD at MIT in urban planning. Her master's thesis at Harvard in urban planning was about what a city does with a site like the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue that came down. So she is all about the process of making of attending to a site like that and bringing people to the table who need to come to the table so whatever's offered back is the right thing. It does the healing work, it does the welcoming work, it does the work it needs to do. She's remarkable. So she's helping us kind of organize our process and leading. We've got Rich Watkins and John Ashworth from the Lynching Sites Project. Ernestine Jenkins is a historian of art at the University of Memphis. Tim, of course, is with us. He's Rhodes and Calvary. He's Calvary and he's Rhodes. We'll put it that way. The Reverend Dorothy Wells, her story, she's an African-American priest colleague of mine in Germantown, and her story's deeply embedded in Calvary. She preached at that service powerfully that we had a few years ago. She's on that group. Margaret started knocking on doors and asking people who owned buildings all around here what was going on in this block of ours years ago. So she's involved in that as well. And David Lusk, who's leading our master plan group. That group is not the group who will make all the decisions. That's the group that's diverse enough to say, who are the right people we need to bring to the table so this process is one we can be proud of as we move forward. These three spaces are three that we're going to actually be talking to the folks who've shaped them in the coming months. The top one is the Amaman Plaza here in Memphis. So we want to talk to the folks who brought that to be. The bottom on the left is the Ed Johnson Memorial in Chattanooga, which is another lynching memorial or slave memorial, but it's in a public space that's both tells a story and is welcoming and beautiful as well. And to the right, this is the enslaved laborers memorial at the University of Virginia, which is one that's really of some renown and gotten a lot of design awards. Different places that have different goals and different stories to tell, but we feel like we can draw wisdom from all of them. In our first meeting, I'm just going to throw this out and then I'm going to turn it over to Matt, but we just brainstormed about what are the kind of things we need to even be thinking of. And some of the words that came up were contemplation, the tension between respite and challenge, how close it is to the pulpit where we're going to be, gender, altar, passage, trauma experts, labor, shade, comfort and discomfort. Will it be interactive? Will water be involved? Our place should be unique to what our story is. How will we use the names? How can we humanize the stories? What's the story of Cotton? Sacred, a Memphis artist we hope to have involved. Will there be a digital aspect? Rich Watkins said sometimes there's a digital aspect. What are the economics of the time? So a broad array of questions that we hope to create a space for our city that tells the truth about our block, but also participates in what we started talking about at the beginning. One more kind of space that a vibrant city needs if it's going to be a living block. So I'm excited and proud that works. So that process is underway and getting started. Again, those are the last actual construction matters that we'll attend to. So we've got time and a calendar laid out for that. I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and then we're going to try to finish around straight up on the hour and take questions on all of these things. So mark your questions on this, and we'll answer them together. Thanks. Come on, Matt. That's your clicker.
Clicker and pointer. Hopefully I'll click less, point less. So thanks for having me here. Sorry to put you through what we're about to go through. It's a joke. I'll try to make it fun. So we did not plan this. You talked about the fact that what we're doing could be sacramental in terms of outward and inward relationships. I sort of have a similar thing that I think about whenever I talk about sustainability to churches, in that sustainability and thinking about sustainability as a prayer, right? So we do this, we say this stuff almost every week, some variety of it, and it basically just says this: whatever we do to the environment, somebody else isn't doing it. We're doing it. Like, the environment would be fine on its own, right? Nature versus human, like, nature and God is always, like, they're undefeated. I know football people in the room. But this is the way it works. We were given something to conserve and to use, not just necessarily like for our benefit, but for everybody else's benefit. So all the things that we talk about when we have problems with the environment, we did it, right? So what can we not do as a church who actually might be inclined to be able to do something about it, or can we ignore it? I'm voting to not ignore it. Can we please? Thank you. Otherwise, we're a crappy example, okay? let's not be hypocrites to what we say every Sunday. So with that solemn, potentially, notion, I guess I want to talk a little bit, I want to nerd out with you just a little bit about buildings. But I promise it's for a good reason. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we're doing with buildings. So the annual global CO2 emissions, that's a long way to say bad stuff that we do to the environment, can be measured specifically with CO2 emissions. 47% is created by the built environment, meaning what we're talking about doing here is 47% of the climate problem. So whenever you do a building project, you have an opportunity to not be 47% of the global climate problem. So within that, you see we have a pizza. Everybody loves pizza, right? It could be gluten-free, could be vegetarian. It's a pizza. There's a yellow piece of pizza, there's a red piece of pizza, and there's a gray piece of pizza. So the 47% of the pizza is the stuff that's warm colored because it's hot and it's awesome and we want to eat it, right? However, we have two different kinds. The yellow pizza is embodied carbon. The red pizza is operational carbon. Operational carbon is our energy bill, the stuff that we use every month and every year to power what we have, okay? So let's just say it's the stuff, we'll just say it's the MLG&W bill, okay? That's one form of offense that we give against the environment. The other part is the embodied carbon. That's the stuff that's either here or the stuff that we build, okay? So think about the yellow is the building, and the red is the energy bill, okay? So what embodied carbon is, it's not just the piece of wood that's in the valence above, but it's the energy that it took to chop it down, put it on a truck, gas up the truck, bring it to here, gas up the items that it took to build it in place, and then the expenditure, all except human labor, all of the stuff that it took. So there's a carbon footprint of that curtain. Everything that it took, all the carbon that was used to get there, that's still there. That's embodied carbon, right? The floor that we're sitting on is embodied carbon. I'm saying this because I told you it was going to be apologetic somewhere. And between now and 2040, there's going to be a shift in those pieces of pizza where embodied carbon's impact is going to get bigger. The piece of the pie is going to be bigger with embodied because technology is going to help us reduce the amount of our MLG&W bill, okay? So relying on some of that technology to defray some of that, that means embodied carbon, the buildings that we make, are actually going to be taking more of a leadership role moving forward. Everybody cool with that? So what that means is, if we manage carbon, we're trying to manage our future habitat. So if we're managing embodied carbon, we're helping to manage the habitat of the people that should go here to church in 100 years. Okay? So in addition to not being willful, blind people just building into the abyss, I would like to argue that this is an opportunity for us to take and be responsible, not just to our own conviction, but also to future Memphians, right? So there's an opportunity. All these are opportunities. So I promise, like one of the last nerd out slides. So one of the things that you can do is you can perform an assessment that tells you how much carbon you have in a place. So a life cycle assessment can be done on a pencil, can be done on a chair. It's basically that tells you the story about the curtain that we were just talking about, of the floor. You can do that for a building. Primarily, it talks about the envelope of the building, the structure of the building, and the foundation of the building, where basically you measure the amount of embodied carbon you have. So it's almost like if we were going to sell this building, right, we would have an assessment about how much this would be worth, right? You would have an appraisal. Think about it not in terms of money, because that's a little problematic, I would say. Think about appraising everything that you have in terms of carbon, in terms of its impact on the environment. I would call that a more honest way of looking about things, right? Think about how we could value the carbon that we have here. And because we've been around a little bit, I would argue that the carbon has been used to different means over a longer period of time here. So one of the things I want to pitch to everyone here is to say, one way to think about sustainability at Calvary with this project is to think about carbon and think about embodying carbon, and how do we take care of that carbon? And we can talk about that to everybody else as a way to honestly show our leadership in understanding how these things are and not worried about just about recycling or something like that. It's not that it's not important, but this is the opportunity we have. So, again, not planned, but Scott was right. When we talked about, when we talked about earlier, you know, he said, here's the new part, right? There's like a ramp over here that's going to help with accessibility. Those are the new parts. Everything that's green, that's what we got, y'all. When we take that assessment, when we look at that assessment and we assess the carbon, think about one of the interesting and brilliant things about this plan is we're not moving to Collierville, right? Which means we're just going to chuck it, right? Right? We're not going to build a new building somewhere else. We're actually going to value what we have and what we have had for a really, really long time. And if you notice, one of the brilliant parts of the plan is we're fitting inside the envelope we already have. We're managing the carbon we already have. Okay? So I'm going to argue that everything that you've heard about and everything that you've talked about is super smart and a really great prayer. So when you think about that, think about the green footprint. Lots of things are changing inside here, but the opportunity with what we're doing is all of these things can change hundreds and hundreds of years into the future, and we keep the carbon we have mostly on site, right? That's really cool. It's not crazy. So that's I think the big sell to you all is when you think about the building environmentally, think about carbon. And if you need me to help you nerd out about that, come talk to me. But as we venture into this project, there are other things that we can do, and there are other groups that we can talk about. These are just the big categories here. We can talk about ways to think about energy and atmosphere. I mean, we don't smoke inside here. There's atmosphere, there's energy. The energy, some of the stuff that we're doing is we're keeping our physical plant. We're recycling our physical plant just like we're recycling our building, right? That's really smart because it hasn't reached the end of its service life. Let's not go throw it and put it in a dumpster and not do anything. Let's use it. Materials and resources and indoor environmental quality, all that means is with all the new things that we're building, we can use adhesives between pieces of wood that don't poison us and don't poison the air. There are things you can do where you can follow rules of all the things that are going in the building in addition to looking at the carbon footprint that make sure that it doesn't take months or years to ventilate the space. And instead of going into us, it doesn't go anywhere because it doesn't show up on site in the first place, right? These are things that we can do and manage in the course of the construction to help us out. Water efficiency is really easy. Technology has helped us out. There are a lot of things in the marketplace where you just buy this one or buy that one and you save hundreds of thousands of gallons over years. So we're going to do that, right? Super simple, really easy. And sustainable sites. We just talked about sites. There are little things that we do called best management practices where we can treasure the amount of stormwater that we get in Memphis because we never get any water, right? There's never any rainfall here. Stormwater quality and stormwater quantity is a really big deal in Memphis. There's ways that every time we pull up a surface and put down a new surface, there's another opportunity for us to be good stewards, right, of things like water, in addition to things like accessibility. There are a lot of opportunities we have where, in addition to doing one thing, providing accessibility or providing a new space or a new front door, we can provide lots of other benefits on top. So in addition to doing a plaza that's more welcoming, you can do a plaza that actually filters stormwater or holds on to the stormwater before it goes back into the city's infrastructure to protect that. All of those things are things that we'll be talking about moving forward. But just an example about how all those things will contribute to overall sustainability and comprehensive sustainability in the project. Okay, once we get that done, once we get the building done, what can we do after? Because we're not just going to sit around and say, oh, we did a good job, let's pat ourselves in the back and increase our pledges annually to help pay for that MLW bill. That's going to be coming from green power and not coal, please God. We can use the life cycle assessment that we have on the carbon here to plan, meaning there's a way in which we can say, we can create a plan that says by X year, Calvary is carbon neutral. There's a way we can do that if we take the assessment during the course of construction, okay? Recycling. Everybody knows about recycling, composting, green housekeeping. There are ways in we can change what we're doing on site here in order to try to help make sure that everything that we wash and everything that we clean is still responsible. And then zero waste practices. If we really want to get serious about things, we could have a group of people that help us work through how we can become a zero waste facility. I'm not saying we should do this tomorrow, but I'm saying we don't have to be satisfied. We haven't been satisfied with outreach in this city for a long time. There's no reason we should limit ourselves to just doing that and not thinking about the environment too. So if you want to geek out with me, we can ask questions now or later, but I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and think about sustainability in building as a prayer. Thank you. Scott?
Thank you, Matt. We both talked kind of fast, but that was fantastic. We're going to take some questions, so let us know that's a lot of information quickly. If you say carbon, I'm going to hand it to Matt. He's got a question.
First of all, I just have to say, before I pose my question, I am so grateful to every single person in this church and outside this church that has worked on this plan. I'm very grateful to each of you, and I want to know that. I want you to know that. And
that's probably like 75, 80, and then if you add people who get sent back forms and surveys,
it's hours and hours of time and thought and prayer and so on. Here is my comment. We have a wonderful stained glass window in our church that we all see every week. And outside is powerful lighting to turn on that window so that people inside can see it and benefit at night when the sun isn't shining. And our mission is to make God visible in downtown Memphis. We need a way to light that window so that it can be seen from the outside at night. It is the gospel narrative, the birth of Jesus, his death, his resurrection, and it tells a story. And I have been downtown at night when I've looked up and it's just black, and you think, what a wonderful thing if somebody was walking or driving and seeing that window at night.
That's a nice
now,
thought, Suzanne.
I think we need to do that, and we don't need to wait till we've done everything else.
LED lights mean that can be more energy efficient, too. There are ways to do that pretty efficiently, right? Am I right on that?
Thank you, Catherine. Scott, if you could go back to the civic slide. That one right there.
Oh, this one?
You had mentioned two of those partners as being out of Memphis. One from Chattanooga dealing with a lynching of a individual, and then the other one dealing with University of Virginia enslaved committee. And I have worked personally with one of the national leaders of the project at UVA. My first question is, I know I'm not a born Calvary member, haven't been here too horribly long, less than 5 years, but I am a history individual. My first question is, why are we reaching out to two groups outside the Memphis area, one dealing with a lynching memorial, when, to my knowledge, there was not lynching done around the church?
So the short answer to that is these are projects that did what they did well. So we also didn't only look at churches when we were designing this, right? What are city blocks that came alive, and what are the principles that... So these were, Margaret said, these are folks that have something in common with your project, and learning from how they got the right people at the table and ask the right questions will help us produce a unique approach to our unique story in that way. So that's why she recommended, and we like the idea of reaching out. Do you have anything else to say to that, Tim? Yeah, we intentionally didn't want to just only have people who did exactly what we did, but people who did a project that involved the kind of steps that we need to take.
Second question. With the work that Tim did with roads with his students, the green marker that is out there that we've had to replace once before, and the fact that the city of Memphis itself seems not to do anything concerning this topic except for the Civil Rights Museum, to my knowledge. Why should Calvary look at taking some of the land, some of the area that we have to highlight a situation that some of us may have think that has already been taken care of with the green marker and the work done by roads?
Oh, we think it's a real opportunity. It's a real opportunity to set a precedent, to show how a community, we have a really unique thing we can do here. We're a community of people who are talking about us and our forebears when we talk about telling this story. We're offering back to the city something we think can actually not only educate on what happened there, but with the broader history of race in America, of slavery, and what's happened today, and where we are today. So we don't know what it'll look like. Again, some of the tensions between how much is this space to make me feel contemplative and uncomfortable even, and how much of it is supposed to make us feel welcome and included to people who might have been excluded from these spaces once upon a time. So it's like liturgy is the work of the people. It's embodied activity in the day, in the present. And we are interested in the liturgies that happen on our block. What are people doing in our spaces? What questions are they asking? What encounters are they having?
I'm not going to ask any more questions, but I would like to sit down with you at a later date and talk more about this topic.
Okay. Yeah, Pat.
I have mentioned this several different times, and I've not been very popular, but you gave me an opening. Yeah, you did. When you talked about what happens and you see bars, you're afraid. Right. And what do we see when we go out in our parking lot? What do those kids at the school see when they come out to play? They see the bars on the windows. You're right. And I understand it's the Grizzlies thing, but we could at least ask the Grizzlies to pay to move those bars. Thank you.
I will ask Tim on Thursday. You're right. You're right. Pat was saying that there are still bars on the old Federal Reserve building on the back of it, and yeah, it's right not to communicate that to folks.
12 years, and I know what bars on the windows.
Yeah, she was a banker too. Yeah, Cap.
Hi. This is personal. I'll say forgive me, but get over it. And I'm not sure where I'm going. Okay. I came to Calvary years ago because I married into Calvary. My wife was raised here. Her family was here. I was married here. My two children were baptized here in the 70s. And I continued to come here for those reasons, but primarily because of the outreach ministry we had. And that was important to me, y'all, because I am a marginalized person. I'm a recovering alcoholic. And I'm happy to say the word recovering before alcoholic, but before I was just an alcoholic and I was not recovering. Okay. Our family's life fell apart in California, and that's why we're here in 1983. And that's how I started my recovery. Calvary was not only a place where I came to worship, which I didn't understand, and I didn't first come here to Calvary after we came here, because I didn't get it. But I came here because there was an AA meeting here, and it was up on the 4th floor, and we had to walk up 4 flights of stairs, and there wasn't very many people there, and it was the weirdest thing in the world. It was I couldn't tell you how unwelcoming it all was, but we came here, and I learned that Calvary was a welcoming place even for people like me, and that's one of the reasons we stayed, okay? And in the old days of the street ministry, and Pat was here. Pat's not one of us. She's here with her heart, and Christine has picked up the mantle. But I got sober here, you all. And it wasn't because this was a welcoming place. I saw it as a necessary place to come because of what was being offered. And let me cut to the chase here. I see, and I've always thought this was a welcoming place for marginalized people like me and many other people, you know. But I see these plans, and I see the new entrance, and I see the side entrance and so on, and that whole scene, that whole thing, looking at it, screams something to me. And it screams that Calvary is putting their arms out and saying to the world, love lives here. Please come in and let us share that with you. I work with marginalized people every day. The thing they're looking for is help and handouts and all of that stuff, and they don't know how to get sober. okay? But they're working for is people who listen to them and people who are offer them dignity. And I think this new plan offers all of that. Thank you.
Gosh, thank you, Cap. Wow. Thank you, Cap. That's a good reminder of both, how all through the years, people's lives have been saved. Right now, our AA group is so great. They move when we have to move. We're doing some construction under here right now for some repairs, and they're right back there in Montgomery Foyer, and they're welcoming people, and Robert's out there making sure the next Cap finds his or her way into Calvary. So thank you for that. One more, if we have it. Yeah, Madge.
The space that's, thank you. The space that's currently the staff parking lot, will that be lowered to the level of where the playground is now, or will the playground be raised up?
That's a good question, Madge. And I think the picture will be, while the details aren't, let me find it. Where did I put it? Pokey. The short answer is it'll be lower. It'll be down, I know I have one on here somewhere. It will be lowered a little bit, and it might, well, you can kind of see it. You can't see it. We think it'll actually provide over on that corner an opportunity for maybe a little seating, like big steps where kids could play, or we could have an amphitheater feel. Charles has used that because we're going to have to cut down. And then it will still be accessible from Second is the idea, but you might, because of the grade, we'd have a wide ramp on the side over by the Welcome Inn that would allow you to have a gentle ramp down into the space. So that also means, like, part of the cost is we've got that chiller, or that chiller that's going to go to the roof that's down underneath. Have you ever been out there? Notice where the kids throw their toys over there so that they sit on the grate over there and it churns out there in the parking lot? So we have to take that out and put it to the roof because we want that space to be available for this. Thank you all. We're always glad to talk about these things. Thank you, Matt. Matt has really helped me. Like we said from the beginning, we want to do what's real and responsible, even if it's not the sexy, flashy stuff with regard to sustainability. What are the pieces we have to attend to the most? And Matt's not just Matt, but he's got some other groups that are going to help us do that real assessment of what we're doing. So thank you for that. Thank you all. See you next week.